On a crisp morning in a bustling commercial district of Chicago, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon fills the air of a cozy diner. Joshua, a 32-year-old programmer, sits at a corner table, a steaming plate of eggs Benedict before him and his laptop open to a maze of code. His fingers dance across the keyboard, eyes flicking back and forth between the screen and his breakfast. The soft hum of conversation around him fades into the background as his mind dives deeper into his work. Joshua's appearance is as precise as his coding, neatly trimmed beard, sharp glasses, and an intense, focused gaze that spoke of his keen intellect. The morning light streams through the window, casting a glow on his serious face. He takes a bite of his meal, savouring the rich hollandaise sauce, when a slight disturbance pulls him from his digital world. The jingle of the doorbell announces the arrival of a mother and her young son. Joshua's eyes flick up from his screen, curiosity piqued. The woman, dressed in a simple yet elegant coat, guided her energetic boy to a table nearby. She leans down, her smile warm and eyes twinkling with affection. "What would you like to eat, sweetie?" she asks, her voice gentle and melodic. The boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, bounces in his seat, eyes wide with excitement. "Pancakes, with lots of syrup," he exclaims, his voice filled with innocent joy. The mother laughs softly, her gaze never leaving her son's face. They share a moment of silent understanding, a bond that speaks volumes in its simplicity. Joshua watches this interaction, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. A bitter smile tugs at his lips, a flicker of something unreadable passing through his eyes. Memories of a different time, perhaps of a similar age, surface briefly. The tenderness between the mother and child was a stark contrast to the solitude he often felt in his meticulously ordered life. He shakes his head slightly, as if to dispel the unwelcome thoughts, and returns his focus to the screen, the clatter of his typing resuming its steady rhythm. The mother and son wait for their order, exchanging playful glances and soft giggles that seem to brighten the diner. Joshua's eyes occasionally drift back to them, drawn by the warmth and simplicity of their interaction. Despite his attempt to immerse himself back in his work, a small part of him can't help but be touched by the scene. As the waiter brings the child's pancakes, complete with a generous drizzle of syrup, the boy's face lights up with sheer delight. "Thank you, Mommy," he beams, and the mother's eyes soften even more. Joshua's attention is captured once more, his work temporarily forgotten. The love and joy shared between the mother and son are a poignant reminder of something he has long put aside. He sighs softly, his smile turning wistful as he takes another sip of his coffee, the warmth spreading through him in more ways than one. The last day Joshua held his mother's hand was 21 years ago, a memory etched in his mind like a vivid painting. He was only 11 back then, and his brother Mark was 7. The excitement was palpable that morning, a rare occasion that broke the monotony of their days since their parents' divorce. "Guess what, boys?" their mother had said, her voice tinged with an enthusiasm they hadn't heard in a long time. "We're going out today, and afterward, we're visiting Grandma." Joshua and Mark exchanged gleeful looks, their eyes widening with anticipation. It had been ages since they'd had a day out together, just the 3 of them. The promise of visiting the amusement park filled them with a renewed sense of joy, and their hearts soared at the thought that perhaps things were finally turning around. In the car, Mark's smile was infectious. "I want to ride the Ferris wheel first," he exclaimed, bouncing in his seat. "And then the roller coaster. Joshua, do you think we can get cotton candy too?" Joshua, with a grin spreading across his face, nodded. "Of course we can, buddy. Today is going to be awesome." Their mother, driving, occasionally glanced at them in the rearview mirror, her face a mix of wistfulness and hope. Joshua noticed her spacing out a few times and kept the conversation lively to keep Mark's spirits high every time he felt down due Jenny's inattentiveness. When they arrived at the amusement park, it was everything they had hoped for, and more. The boys ran from ride to ride, their laughter blending with the cheerful noise of the park. Joshua felt a lightness in his heart, a fleeting moment of pure happiness he wanted to cling to forever. The sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the park. They found a quiet spot to rest, and Mark, his face flushed with excitement, turned to Joshua. "I wish this day would never end," he said softly, his voice filled with innocent longing. Joshua nodded, a bittersweet smile playing on his lips. "Me too, Mark. Me too." He reached out, taking his mother's hand on his right and Mark's smaller hand on his left. He tightened his grip, as if holding onto them both with all his might could somehow make their wishes come true. As they walked back to the car, the glow of the park fading behind them, Joshua felt a strange sense of finality. His mother's hand in his felt different, almost distant. He glanced up at her, but she was looking straight ahead, her face unreadable. That night, after they visited Grandma and returned home, their mother tucked them into bed with extra tenderness. Joshua didn't know it then, but that day marked the end of an era. The next morning they woke to find their mother gone, a note on the kitchen table explaining that she needed to find herself, to heal in ways she couldn't while being there with them. The memory of that day in the amusement park stayed with Joshua, a bittersweet reminder of a fleeting moment of happiness before everything changed. Holding his mother's hand for the last time, he had felt a connection he would always yearn for but never quite recapture. Then, with a determined shake of Joshua's head, he forced himself back to the world of algorithms and code, though the image of the mother and child lingered in his mind, a gentle echo of what could have been. More than an hour later, Joshua steps into his apartment, the door clicking shut behind him with a quiet finality. The space is a reflection of his life, simple, neat, and elegant, but cold as if it were a model home rather than a lived-in sanctuary. The minimalist decor and monochromatic palette exuded efficiency and order, but lacked the vibrancy of a place truly called home. He slipped off his shoes and set his laptop bag on the sleek glass coffee table, pausing for a moment to take in the silence. The only sound is the faint hum of the refrigerator in the adjacent kitchen. The apartment is impeccably clean, with each item meticulously arranged, from the modern art on the walls to the stainless steel appliances. Yet, despite its outward perfection, it feels devoid of life, like a stage set waiting for its actors. Joshua moves towards his bedroom to change for his upcoming client meeting. The room is as pristine as the rest of the apartment, with a neatly made bed, crisp white sheets, and dark wooden furniture. But there, on the bedside table, is the single trace of warmth in his otherwise sterile existence. A small, framed photograph. He picks up the picture gently, as if it were a delicate relic. The image is of a teenage Joshua, a younger Mark, and their grandma, her face lined with age but softened by a gentle smile. They were in a hospital room, the starkness of the setting contrasted by the warmth of their expressions. Joshua's arm was around Mark, who was grinning widely, while their grandma sat in a chair, her eyes full of love as she looked at her grandsons. Joshua remembers that day vividly. It was one of the times in those tumultuous years after their mother's departure that he had felt a semblance of family and belonging. Grandma had been their rock, her kindness a balm for their wounded hearts. He could almost hear her soft, comforting voice and feel the warmth of her hugs that made the sterile hospital room feel like home. When Joshua was 18, Grandma Jane summoned him and his brother to the cozy living room, its walls adorned with sepia-toned photographs and memories of yesteryears. The scent of lavender tea wafted through the air, a comforting contrast to the gravity of the conversation that was about to unfold. Grandma Jane's eyes, deep pools of wisdom and sorrow, met Joshua's. "The day you boys dropped by after your trip to the amusement park," she began, her voice steady but soft, "I noticed something was wrong." Joshua and his brother exchanged glances, the memory of that day vivid in their minds. The laughter, the thrill of roller coasters, and the unsettling emptiness that followed. "Jenny is my daughter," Grandma Jane continued, her voice tinged with a bittersweet mix of love and regret. "I know she's suffering. I thought she would quickly recover just like others. If only I had been there for her more than I was, maybe she wouldn't have simply left." "Grandma, it's not your fault," Joshua interjected, his voice firm yet gentle. His brother nodded in agreement, their expressions a mirror of compassion and resolve. A small, grateful smile curved Grandma Jane's lips. "Thank you, boys, but there's something you need to know. Jenny kept in touch with me occasionally. She asked about you two, always concerned. She's been in a medical facility, trying to treat her depression." The weight of her words settled over the room like a thick, heavy fog. Joshua felt a lump in his throat, the revelation both a relief and a new burden. "Jenny's world fell apart with the divorce," Grandma Jane explained, her voice cracking slightly. "And when she found out Fred had already started a new family before everything was finalized, it crushed her. It was too much." The brothers sat in stunned silence, absorbing the layers of pain and betrayal their mother had endured. Grandma Jane's gaze softened, her eyes reflecting years of heartache and resilience. "But boys," she said, reaching out to hold their hands, "never doubt how much she loves you. Her depression keeps her paralyzed and afraid. She thinks she's unworthy to be a wife, a daughter, and even a mother to you." Joshua felt a tear slip down his cheek, quickly followed by another. His brother squeezed Grandma Jane's hand, his grip a silent promise of understanding and support. "She loves you more than anything," Grandma Jane whispered in her voice, a lifeline in the sea of their emotions. "And perhaps one day she'll find her way back to you." The room fell into a gentle silence, the only sound the rhythmic ticking of the old grandfather clock. That day, the brothers had a deeper understanding of their mother's struggles and a renewed sense of compassion. The conversation had opened their eyes to the complexities of love and pain, and though their journey was far from over, they now carried with them the strength of their grandmother's wisdom and the enduring love of their mother. As they stepped into the cool evening air, Joshua looked at his brother, a newfound determination in his eyes. "We'll get through this together," he said, his voice unwavering. "Together," his brother echoed, and for the first time in a long while, the future didn't seem so daunting. The road to healing had begun, and with each step, they moved closer to the light at the end of the tunnel, hoping that their mother would soon return well. The seasons changed, and years slipped by, and the absence of Jenny became a permanent shadow over the family. The brothers waited and hoped, but Jenny never came back. Grandma Jane, with her silver hair and eyes that had seen too much, was left to pick up the fragments of her grandsons' shattered hearts. Joshua the elder wore a mask of resilience. To the outside world, he appeared unaffected, a young man who had come to terms with his mother's abandonment. His laughter was loud, his smiles frequent, but they were as hollow as the echoes in an empty room. Beneath this facade, his heart ached with a sorrow he kept well hidden. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, Joshua sat on the porch steps. The air was cool, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Grandma Jane joined him, her steps slow but steady. She sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap, her presence a comforting balm. "Joshua," she began softly, her voice a gentle murmur. "You don't have to pretend for my sake." Joshua stiffened, his fingers clenching the edge of the wooden step. "I'm fine, Grandma," he said, forcing a smile. "I've accepted it. We all have." Grandma Jane sighed, a sound filled with the weight of years and wisdom. "You've always been strong, my dear, but even the strongest need to share their burdens." He looked at her then, really looked, and saw the depth of understanding in her eyes. The mask slipped, just a little, and the raw pain beneath was exposed. "I have to be strong," Joshua whispered, his voice cracking. "For you, for Mark. I can't let you down." Grandma Jane reached out, her hand warm and reassuring. "You've never let us down, Joshua, but carrying all this alone, it's too much. You don't have to be invincible." Joshua's eyes filled with tears he had held back for too long. I miss her so much, Grandma, and I'm scared that if I let go, everything will fall apart." Tears welled in Grandma Jane's eyes as she pulled him into an embrace, her arms frail but filled with fierce love. "It's okay to miss her, Joshua. It's okay to feel. We'll hold each other up. You're not alone in this." At that moment, the pretense fell away completely, and Joshua allowed himself to grieve openly for the first time. The tears came in torrents, washing away the years of suppressed pain, and in their place, a fragile sense of healing began to take root. Mark appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of his brother's sobs. He joined them, wrapping his arms around both his brother and grandmother, forming a small circle of support and love. "We'll get through this," Mark said softly, his voice a promise. Grandma Jane nodded, her heart swelling with pride and love for her grandsons. "Together," she whispered. The darkness of their shared sorrow did not disappear that night, but a light had been kindled. They would face the future hand in hand, their bond stronger for the trials they had endured. If only good deeds can be traded with years of life, Joshua is sure that his grandma will be happily alive 5 or more decades from now, rather than leaving the world due to old age. If only that is the case, he and Mark can still be with the person who became their solace through the storm. With a sigh, Joshua sets the photograph back on the table. He changes into a crisp shirt and tailored pants, his movements mechanical and efficient. As he adjusts his tie in the mirror, he catches a glimpse of his reflection. The intense, focused gaze that serves him so well in his profession was there, but behind it lingers a shadow of the boy in the photograph, a boy who had known the simple joy of holding his mother's hand and the profound comfort of his grandma's presence. The clock on the wall ticks away, reminding him of his impending meeting. Joshua squares his shoulders and grabs his laptop bag, heading for the door. But just before he steps out, he glances back at the photograph one last time, drawing strength from the memory it held. As he closes the door behind him, the apartment returns to its cold, impersonal stillness. The sleek glass tower of the top IT company stands tall, a beacon of modernity and innovation. As Joshua steps through the revolving doors, the bustling lobby hums with the energy of sharp minds and ambitious spirits. The young man's eyes, deep and brown, held a quiet intensity, hinting at stories untold and experiences far beyond his years. Inside the boardroom, Director John waits with an air of authority. The senior executive is known for his keen intellect and no-nonsense attitude. He watches Joshua with a discerning eye as the young man sets up his presentation. There is something in Joshua's demeanor, a blend of confidence and humility, that piqued John's interest. "Good morning, Director John," Joshua begins, his voice steady and clear. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me today." The meeting unfolds seamlessly. Joshua navigates through complex data with ease, his insights sharp and innovative. John's expression shifts from skeptical to impressed as Joshua's words paint a picture of potential and progress. By the end of the discussion, John leans back in his chair, a rare smile curling at the corners of his mouth. "Joshua," he says, his tone warm and approving, "I must say, I look forward to doing more business with you." The compliment is a badge of honor, and Joshua's boss, Daniel, who has been observing silently, beams with pride. The meeting concludes on a high note, with handshakes and promises of future collaboration. As the workday draws to a close, Joshua makes his way to his office, the weight of the day's achievements resting comfortably on his shoulders. He is about to continue some unfinished work when his phone rings. Glancing at the screen, he sees Mark's name flash up. For the first time that day, a genuine smile softens his features. "Hey Mark," Joshua greets, warmth in his voice. "Josh, is your work done for the day?" Mark's voice is filled with excitement and youthful exuberance. "For you, Mark, I always have time," Joshua replied, his tone playful. Mark's hearty laugh echoes through the phone. "Great. Dinner's on me tonight. Can you believe it?" Joshua chuckles, shaking his head. "Now that makes me nervous. You're not exactly known for your generosity with your wallet. I might as well change careers and be a song composer." "Very funny, but you can't. You don't have talent, my dear brother," Mark retorts, still laughing. "I promise tonight's different. Meet me at the usual place in a few hours?" "Sure thing. I'll see you there," Joshua agrees, ending the call with a smile. As he slips his phone into his pocket, Joshua's stoic exterior melts away, replaced by a spark of anticipation. His eyes, previously focused and serious, now gleam with a vibrant energy. The prospect of spending time with his younger brother, sharing stories and laughter over a meal, is a reward that outshines any professional accolade. Hours later, the city lights begin to twinkle as Joshua drives towards the restaurant, the evening sky painted in shades of dusky pink and gold. He feels a warmth in his chest, a sense of fulfillment that transcended the success of his business meeting. Tonight, he isn't just a young professional impressing senior executives. He is a big brother, eager to reconnect and savor the simple joy of family. Joshua steps into the popular restaurant, its chandeliers casting a warm golden glow over the elegantly set tables and plush velvet chairs. The gentle clinking of glasses creates an ambience of refined sophistication. As he glances around, he can't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the journey that has brought him and his brother to such heights, where they can indulge in these luxuries. A courteous staff member guides Joshua to a private corner of the establishment, where he takes his seat, patiently waiting with barely contained excitement. The anticipation of seeing Mark after months brings a rare sparkle to his usually composed demeanor. Moments later, his younger brother enters, and they share a warm, heartfelt embrace. "Josh, it's been too long," Mark exclaims, his eyes shining with joy. "It has," Joshua replies, smiling broadly. "Let's enjoy tonight." As the sumptuous dishes arrive one by one, the brothers' conversation flows with ease. They laugh over shared memories, tease each other, and talk about their plans and dreams. The bond between them is palpable, a comforting presence in the elegant setting. But just before dessert is served, the atmosphere shifts. Mark, with a tentative look, breaks the spell. "Josh," he begins, his voice softening, "what will you do when you meet Mom again?" Joshua's expression freezes, as if he has been doused in icy water. His sharp gaze meets Mark's wavering but sincere hazel eyes, so uncannily similar to their mother's. For a moment, the clinking of cutlery and murmurs of nearby diners fade into the background. "Let's not talk about this," Joshua says abruptly, his voice hardening. Mark, undeterred, presses on. "We can't avoid it forever. What will you do?" Joshua's appetite vanishes. He places his utensils down with a finality that speaks volumes. "If this is why you want to meet, to discuss irrelevant matters, I'd rather pay for the meal myself." Mark's face falls as Joshua stands up, his demeanor cold and unyielding. He taps his younger brother's shoulder in a gesture that is more dismissive than affectionate. "Good night, Mark." As Joshua walks away, his aura darkens, a storm cloud of emotions swirling around him. The restaurant staff, sensing his mood, hesitates to approach, offering only subdued greetings as he passes. He drives home with a leaden heart, his hands gripping the wheel tightly, his body trembling with seething anger. Once home, Joshua removes his suit jacket and pours himself a glass of whiskey. He stands before the large window of his high-rise apartment, looking down at the cityscape below. The lights of the city twinkle innocently, oblivious to the turmoil within him. Memories of the past resurface, fragments of a life he has tried so hard to forget. His mother's face, her voice, the pain of their estrangement, all come flooding back. He takes a long, bitter sip of the whiskey, the burn of the alcohol a stark contrast to the icy bitterness of his memories. Years ago, a sunlit morning dawned over the small house where Joshua and Mark lived. The remnants of their joyful day at the amusement park still lingered in their dreams, but as they awoke, an unsettling silence replaced the warmth of their mother's presence. Instead of her familiar voice, a cold, impersonal note awaited them on the kitchen table. "I need to find myself to heal properly, and I couldn't do it if I would stay with you." Mark, then only 7 years old, broke into heart-wrenching sobs, his cries echoing through the empty rooms. Joshua, though older by just 5 years, felt an overwhelming wave of fear and disbelief. How could their mother abandon them, especially knowing their father had already built a new life with another family? The world around Joshua seemed to blur, the bright morning light harsh and unforgiving. For a few moments, Joshua could only stare at his little brother, tears streaming down Mark's face. But then, a steely resolve took hold of him. He wasn't just a child anymore, he was Mark's protector now. Shaking off his fear, he picked up the phone and dialed the only person he could think of, Grandma Jane. "Grandma," Joshua said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Mum's gone." There was a brief silence on the other end, a moment that stretched into eternity. Then, Grandma Jane's voice came through, gentle and soothing. "Don't worry, my dear. I've got you both. Stay with Mark until I get there." Joshua sat beside Mark, holding his little brother's hand tightly. More than an hour later, there was a knock at the door. He opened it to find Grandma Jane standing there, her face a mix of concern and love. She knelt down, enveloping Joshua in a warm, comforting embrace. "You've done so well, Joshua," she whispered, her voice full of praise. "You're such a brave and clever boy." At that moment, the dam broke. All the emotions Joshua had held back came flooding out, and he cried loudly in his grandmother's arms. Grandma Jane held him tightly, her words a steady stream of comfort and reassurance, soothing the storm inside him. "It's all right, my sweet boy," she murmured, stroking his hair. "I'm here now. You're not alone." As his sobs subsided, Joshua felt a fragile sense of peace settled over him. Wrapped in his grandmother's embrace, he understood that no matter how fractured their family had become, they still had each other, and in that moment, that was enough. After calming down, the three headed to Grandma Jane's place. A cool, gentle breeze rustled the curtains of the cozy house. The brothers, Joshua and Mark, had always felt an unspoken warmth in this space, as if it were a living, breathing entity that wrapped its arms around them in a comforting embrace. Today, more than ever, this house had become their sanctuary, a haven from the tumultuous storm that had turned their world upside down. That evening, Grandma Jane bustled about the kitchen, her movements swift yet deliberate, as she prepared a simple but hearty meal for the boys. The crackle of the frying pan and the rhythmic chopping of vegetables provided a soothing backdrop, a symphony of normalcy that eased the tension in the air. She glanced over at Joshua and Mark, who sat at the table, their eyes downcast and shoulders slumped. Her heart ached for them, but she knew that the warmth of her home and the love she poured into every action would help soothe their troubled spirits. As the evening shadows lengthened and the boys' initial storm of emotions began to settle, Grandma Jane set the table with care, placing steaming bowls of soup and fresh bread before them. They ate in companionable silence, the clinking of spoons and the occasional murmur of appreciation, the only sounds that punctuated the quiet. When the meal was over, Jane gently steered the conversation towards the truth she needed to share. "Joshua, Mark," she began, her voice calm and steady, "there's something important we need to talk about." She saw their eyes widen with apprehension, and she quickly reached out, taking their hands in hers, her touch a reassuring anchor. "Your mum, Jenny, she's not feeling well. Her heart and mind are very tired, and she needs to go to a special place far away to heal." Mark's lip trembled, and Joshua's grip tightened on his grandmother's hand. "But why does she have to leave us, Grandma?" Mark's voice was barely a whisper, a fragile thread of sound. Grandma Jane drew in a deep breath, choosing her words with care. "It's not because she doesn't love you. In fact, it's because she loves you so much that she wants to get better. She needs to take care of herself so she can be the best mum for you." Think of it like when a plant needs extra care and sunlight to grow strong again." Joshua nodded slowly, his mind turning over his grandmother's words. He looked at Mark, his younger brother's eyes filled with confusion and fear, and he made a silent promise to himself. He would do his best to be strong for both of them, to take care of Mark and to help his grandmother. "Will she come back, Grandma?" Mark asked, his voice small and hopeful. Jane's eyes softened as she gently squeezed their hands. "Yes, darling, she will come back. She loves you more than anything in the world, and that love will never change. Until then, I'll be here with you, every step of the way. We're a team, aren't we?" Joshua and Mark nodded, a glimmer of hope rekindling in their hearts. The flickering candlelight reflected in their eyes, casting a warm glow that mirrored the resilience slowly taking root within them. As the night deepened and the stars began to twinkle in the velvet sky, the three of them sat together, a united front against the uncertainties ahead. The house, with its comforting nooks and crannies, its familiar scents and sounds, stood as a testament to the enduring strength of what remains as their family. And in that moment, Joshua silently vowed to be the rock his family needed, to support his grandmother and protect his brother until the day they were all reunited with their beloved mother. But fate, with its inscrutable designs, had other plans. Days blurred into weeks, weeks bled into months, and months stretched into years, yet Jenny did not return. Her absence cast a long shadow over Grandma Jane's cozy house, now a fortress of endurance and unspoken sorrows. Grandma Jane, steadfast and loving, became the unwavering anchor in the boys' lives. Every morning she would serve breakfast with a smile and a gentle reminder, "Your mother loves you. She just needs more time to heal." Each birthday, each school achievement, and each holiday Jenny missed etched deeper cracks into Mark's innocent heart. He longed desperately for a mother's embrace, a gentle word, a shared laugh. The milestones meant to be celebrated became painful reminders of a gaping void in his life. For Joshua, every missed promise was a nail in the coffin of his childhood innocence. His once tender heart, full of hope and love, hardened with each passing disappointment. He transformed his pain into a shield, forging an armor of indifference to protect himself from the endless stream of letdowns. The loving boy who used to laugh freely and dream vividly now faced the world with a steely resolve, his emotions locked away in a fortress of his own making. Grandma Jane watched this transformation with a heavy heart. She saw how Joshua, once the protector of his brother and the keeper of hope, now walked through life with a guarded expression and distant eyes. Late at night, when the world was quiet, Joshua would sometimes hear his grandmother on the phone, her voice hushed and pleading. "Jenny, please come back to your children, they need you." But the reunions never happened, and each call ended with Jane's weary sigh, her prayers to the heavens growing more fervent but seemingly unanswered. Jane also reached out to Fred, her former son-in-law, hoping he might bridge the gap and offer the emotional support the boys so desperately needed. But Fred, ensnared by his own failures and regrets, and the new family he has, remained a distant figure, his promises as empty as Jenny's absence. Despite the financial support he regularly sent, his physical and emotional presence remained painfully absent. Through it all, Grandma Jane stood as a surrogate parent, tirelessly working to provide the love and stability Joshua and Mark craved. Her efforts were Herculean, but the persistent disappointments took their toll. Joshua, witnessing her sacrifices and tireless endeavors, became resolute. He saw the futility in hoping for a parental reunion, each dashed expectation a bitter lesson. In his young but fiercely protective mind, Jenny and Fred ceased to exist as his family. They were ghosts, strangers who had brought him into the world only to abandon him. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Joshua sat with his grandmother on the porch. The air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine, a sharp contrast to the heaviness in his heart. "Grandma," he said, his voice devoid of the childish softness it once held, "I don't need them. You're my family, you and Mark." Jane's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, understanding the depth of his words. She wrapped her arm around his shoulders, pulling him close. "We'll always have each other, Joshua, always." And so, under the starlit sky, with the cool night air wrapping around them, Joshua made his peace with the life he had. The boy who once hoped fervently for his parents' return now found solace in the unwavering love of his grandmother and the bond with his brother. He forged ahead, determined to carve out a future free from the shadows of the past, where the family he had chosen stood steadfast beside him. However, under the same starlit sky after all those years of parental neglect, his mother's actions always haunt him to the depths of despair. Staring out at the city, Joshua feels the weight of his past pressing down on him, a reminder of wounds that have never truly healed. The reunion with his mum looms like a dark shadow, a confrontation he isn't ready to face, knowing how stubborn his dear brother is. For now, he can only stand there, wrestling with the ghosts of his past and the uncertain future that lay ahead. The following day, the sun rises in a golden blaze, casting long shadows through the city streets. Joshua follows his meticulously crafted routine, a vigorous morning exercise that leaves him breathless but momentarily free, a hot shower that washes away the sweat, but not the worries, and finally, a quiet breakfast at his favourite cafe. The cafe's aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods usually brings him a semblance of peace, but today, tranquility is elusive. Mark's insistent voice from the previous night echoes in his mind, a relentless reminder of unresolved emotions. "Josh, we need to talk about Mom." Mark's messages buzzed repeatedly on his phone, each one a pinprick in Joshua's carefully constructed armour. He sighs, stirring his coffee with unnecessary force, wishing for once that their grandmother hadn't raised Mark to be so tenacious. Still, Joshua manages to fulfill his work duties with his usual precision, though deeper frowns and sharper glares make his colleagues tread lightly around him, their nervous glances reflecting the storm brewing within him. Days slip by, and Joshua gradually settles back into his routine. He is almost his old self, the facade firmly in place, until one evening after a particularly grueling day at work. Just as he is about to slide into his car, Mark appears, his face set with an unusual seriousness. "Josh, can we talk?" Mark approaches cautiously, his voice polite but determined. Joshua's eyes narrow. "What is it, Mark? Can you please try to meet Mum? Just once," Mark says, his tone a mixture of plea and resolve. Joshua's expression turns icy. "No, please, Josh. If you can't do it for any other reason, do it for me. As a favour to your younger brother," Mark implores, his eyes searching Joshua's for any flicker of empathy. They stand there, the city's evening hustle and bustle a distant hum, staring deeply into each other's eyes. It is a silent battle of wills, each brother measuring the other's resolve. For the first time, it is Joshua who breaks the gaze, his eyes dropping to the ground. Mark takes a step forward, his voice soft but earnest. "I know how hurt you are, Josh. I am never blind to it. I know how hard it's been for you to take on the role of my protector and support Grandma. But I see the burden you carry. You haven't let go of the anger towards Mom since we were closer to her. If meeting her even once can help you let go of those dark feelings, I'm willing to risk it all." Joshua clenches his fists, the weight of Mark's words sinking deep. He has spent years building walls to protect himself, to shield his heart from the pain of their mother's abandonment. But here is Mark, the brother he has tried so hard to shield, standing before him, offering a way to possibly unburden his soul. "Mark, you don't understand," Joshua begins, but his voice falters. "I do understand," Mark interrupts gently, "more than you think, and I'm asking you to do this for us, for you, for our family, no matter how broken it seems." The silence that follows is heavy, each second stretching like an eternity. Finally, Joshua lets out a long breath, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly. "All right, Mark, I'll do it. For you." Mark's face lights up with a rare smile, a spark of hope kindling in his eyes. "Thank you, Josh. Thank you." As they enter the car together, Joshua feels a sliver of the weight he has carried for so long begin to lift. It is a tentative step, a small crack in the walls he has built, but it is a beginning, and for the first time in years, Joshua dares to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, there is a way to heal. Meanwhile, Mark silently observes his brother while taking over the driver's seat, his mind reciting a silent prayer that this meeting finally becomes a key to Joshua's happiness. That maybe, just maybe, his elder brother can finally be free. A couple of hours later, the brothers arrive at the outskirts of the city, where the cacophony of urban life gives way to nature's tranquil serenade. The symphony of rustling leaves and chirping birds fills the air, soothing the tension that has coiled within Joshua like a tight spring. Mark pulls the car to a gentle stop, a playful grin dancing on his lips. Joshua raises an eyebrow, curiosity mingles with a hint of annoyance. "Why are we stopping here?" Mark chuckles, his laughter a light, melodious sound that seems to harmonize with the surrounding peace. "Trust me, Josh, just step out." They exit the car, Joshua looking around, his puzzlement deepening as he takes in the sight of a small daycare center nestled amidst the greenery. The building, though modest, exuded a warm, inviting charm, its brightly painted walls adorned with cheerful murals of children playing. Mark, with a mischievous glint in his eye, drapes an arm over Joshua's shoulder, guiding him towards the entrance. "Come on, big brother, just go with it." As they enter the daycare, Joshua notices the stillness. The children have long gone home, leaving behind an almost eerie silence. However, a single room at the far corner of the bungalow glowed softly, its light a beacon in the growing twilight. Mark leads Joshua to the lit room, his steps confident as if he has been here many times before. He knocks on the door, the sound echoing in the quiet building, and calls out, "Hey, it's Mark!" There is a moment of shuffling from inside before the door opens to reveal a woman with a gentle, familiar smile. A smile that mirrors Mark's in a way that tugs at Joshua's heart. She freezes, her eyes widening as she sees Joshua standing beside his brother. For a heartbeat, the air was thick with unspoken words, memories, and emotions. Then she regains her composure and steps back, gesturing for them to enter. "Please come in," she says softly, her voice trembling slightly as she speaks. Joshua hesitates, his feet rooted to the spot, but Mark nudges him forward, his touch reassuring. As they step inside, Joshua takes in the room, a simple yet cozy space filled with children's drawings and a few well-loved toys. The woman, their mother, stands by a small table, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "Joshua, it's been a long time," Jenny says, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Joshua's heart pounds in his chest, a tumult of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Anger, hurt, longing, all swirl within him, but he keeps his face impassive, his walls still standing strong. Mark, sensing the tension, gently squeezes his brother's shoulder. "Mom, Joshua agreed to come here because I asked him to. We need to talk. We need to understand." Jenny nods, her gaze never leaving Joshua's face. "I know I've hurt you both. I know I've failed you as a mother, but I want to explain, if you'll let me." The silence that follows is thick and heavy, stretching out painfully. Finally, Joshua finds his voice, though it is rough and edged with years of suppressed pain. "Explain then." Jenny takes a deep breath, her hands shaking. "I was sick, Joshua, mentally and emotionally. I wasn't strong enough to be the mother you needed. I thought leaving was the only way to protect you from my own brokenness." Joshua's eyes flash with anger. "And abandoning us was the solution. Leaving Grandma to pick up the pieces." Tears spill down Jenny's cheeks, her voice breaking. "I thought I was doing what was best. I thought I could come back when I was better, but I kept failing. Every time I tried, I failed, and I'm so sorry." Mark steps forward, his eyes filled with empathy and hope. "Mum, we're not here to reopen old wounds. We're here to understand and maybe find a way to heal." Jenny nods, her eyes pleading. "Please, Joshua, give me a chance to make things right. Let me be a part of your lives again, even if it's just a small part." Joshua's hardened exterior wavers, the sight of his mother's genuine remorse and Mark's unwavering hope chipping away at his defenses. He breathes deeply, his voice softening. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Mom, but for Mark's sake, and maybe for mine too, I'll try." Jenny's face crumples with relief, and she steps forward, hesitantly reaching out. Joshua doesn't move, but he doesn't pull away either. It is a small step, but in that quiet room, surrounded by remnants of childhood innocence, it feels like the beginning of something new. As they stand there, the night deepening outside, the sounds of nature whispering through the open window, Joshua feels a glimmer of something he hasn't felt in years. Hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, this is the first step towards mending the fractured pieces of their family. Jenny sits at the kitchen stool, her fingers tracing the wood grain, as the evening light casts long, melancholic shadows across the room. The air is thick with unspoken words, and the silence feels like a weight pressing down on her chest. She takes a deep breath, her heart pounding like a drumbeat in the stillness. "Joshua, Mark," she begins, her voice trembling like the fragile wings of a moth. "I need to tell you something." Her eyes, heavy with unshed tears, search their faces for understanding, for some flicker of connection that seems lost in the tumultuous sea of her mind. Joshua, the elder of the two, leans back in his chair, his arms crossed defensively. Jenny swallows hard, her throat constricting around the words she struggles to form. "I've been carrying a lot of pain," she says, her voice breaking. When he decided to leave us and start a new life before our divorce was even final, it shattered something inside me." She pauses, the memories flooding back like a tidal wave, threatening to drown her. "I began to doubt myself," she continues, her eyes pleading for their understanding. "I felt like I had failed you, failed our family. I thought I wasn't worthy of being your mother or anyone's wife." Mark reaches out, his hand covering hers. "But you're here now, Mom," he said, his voice a beacon of hope in the darkness. Jenny squeezes his hand, drawing strength from his touch. "I tried to be there for you," she says, her voice gaining a semblance of steadiness. "Every birthday, every school event, every important occasion, even at my own mother's funeral, But I was so scared, so broken that I could only watch from afar. Her words hung in the air, fragile and delicate, like spider silk glistening in the morning dew. She looks into Joshua's eyes, hoping he can see her sincerity, her desperate need for them to understand. Joshua's gaze softens, the hardness in his expression melting away. He realizes then that he has never truly sought explanations. It is enough to be there, together, in this quiet corner of the world. "Mum," Joshua says, his voice firm but gentle, "we're here now, and we're together. That's what matters." Jenny's heart swells with a mixture of relief and sorrow, the storm inside her beginning to calm. She sees it then in Mark's eyes, a spark of purpose, a glint of determination that she hasn't noticed before. "We're going to be okay," Mark says, his voice strong and sure, "because we have each other." Tears stream down Jenny's face, but for the first time in a long while, they are tears of hope. She pulls her sons into a tight embrace, feeling the warmth of their love envelop her like a soothing balm. In that moment, the shadows recede, and the light shines a little brighter. They are a family, bruised but unbroken, ready to face the future together. And Jenny knows, deep in her heart, that they will find their way through the darkness hand in hand. "Mark's been busy," Jenny says, her voice trailing off as if lost in thought. "He's joined a non-profit, volunteering in small schools, rural and suburban." Joshua turns to Mark, eyebrows raised. "Really?" Mark nods, a modest smile playing on his lips. "Yeah, just a chance encounter brought me here months ago. Saw Jenny at the daycare and, well, things changed." The air thickens with unsaid words, the weight of shared memories pressing down on them. The brothers, successful in their own right, Joshua, the brilliant programmer, and Mark, the soulful composer, have always been haunted by the shadow of their mother's abandonment. It's a ghost that clings to them, its cold fingers digging into the deepest parts of their hearts. Joshua looks at Mark, really looks at him, and sees more than his little brother. He sees a man who has found a purpose, who has faced his demons and come out stronger, a man who has realized that their true enemy is not the world, but the lingering pain of their past. "Mark, how did you?" Joshua begins, but Mark shakes his head. "It wasn't easy," Mark says, his voice steady. "But I figured out that we're trapped, Josh, trapped by the negative emotions from our past. Mom's leaving. It's like a wound that never really healed." Jenny watches them, her heart aching for the pain they carry. "The scars might reopen," she says softly, "but maybe this meeting is the start of something new, a chance for forgiveness." Silence settles over them, thick and heavy, as if the room itself is holding its breath. The brothers leave, the cool evening air wrapping around them like a balm. They enter the car, and for a moment, the world seems to hold its breath. Silence envelops them, a cocoon of unspoken understanding. Mark turns to Joshua, his hand reaching out to squeeze his shoulder, his eyes searching his brother's. "Joshua," he says, his voice a promise, "let me help you this time. Let me be the one to help lift your burden." Joshua feels a warmth spreading through him, a crack in the cold fortress around his heart. In Mark's eyes, he sees not just his little brother, but a partner, a friend, someone who will stand by him no matter what. "All right, Mark," Joshua says, his voice barely a whisper but filled with a new hope. "We'll do this together." The gate to their happiness is cracked open, and though it might not be instant, the first step has been taken. Together they will face their ghosts, heal their wounds, and find the happiness that has eluded them for so long. And as they drive away, the silence between them is no longer empty, but filled with the promise of a new beginning.